All right, we're gonna get started, everyone. First, we'd like to say hello and welcome to everyone in person and online. Thank you for joining us and making time to attend Loyola Stand's first community conversation in our series. My name is Idike Yeoman, and I am a public health graduate student at the School of Parkinson, and also a fellow for Loyola Stands. One of 5. We have 3 in person today and 1 online. So some of you may be wondering what a community conversation is. To put it bluntly or shortly, it essentially serves as an informal opportunity for us to provide Loyola students and our community members with opportunities to learn from experts about gun violence issues, as well as provide them with tools and strategies to advocate for neighborhoods free from gun violence. Today's community conversation is titled Violence Interrupters in Action. And we'll be covering how gun violence and violence in general affects you, how it connects to Chicago, and how we as students, faculty, and community members can begin working to help improve and make our community safer. I would now like to introduce the facilitators for today's conversation, Brian Dye and Jarvis Buchanan. A little bit more about them. Brian was born and raised in the west side of Chicago. He has been engaged with youth mentorship since 1992 and founded Legacy Disciples in 2018. Legacy Disciples develops leaders that in turn develop programs and initiatives for the greater good of our society. Brian enjoys bike riding, history, exploring Chicago, and empowering others. Brian lives on the west side of Chicago along with his wife, Mike. And Jarvis was born on Chicago's south side, but raised on the west side. He has been engaged in youth mentorship since 2015 and founded Hood Heroes in 2020. Hood Heroes employs, equips, and empowers you to become leaders in their community. Jarvis enjoys working out, building relationships, playing his acoustic guitar, and educating Black and brown boys on how to channel their emotions towards a greater future. Jarvis lives on the west side of Chicago along with his wife, Alanisha, and 1 daughter, Dallas. Please join me in welcoming them up here.
Good to be here with everybody. I'm Brian, and this is Jarvis. We've been asked to come and just kind of share a little bit of our story. And so I'll start. We'll kind of tag team back and forth here. I grew up in Humboldt Park. Everyone native of Chicago, where you guys from? Anyone native of Chicago? Okay. Humboldt Park in the 80s and 90s was one of the more violent communities of Chicago. Walking to my elementary school 3 blocks away, I literally walked through 3 different gang territories. I remember being 12 years old, playing basketball with a bunch of friends. Someone was dropping us off. We dropped off one of our friends, pulled off. A block away, we heard gunshots. Found out that my friend Eric was killed. He was probably about 13 years old at the time. Rico, Cody, Fat, name after name of friends as I was growing up, shot and killed way before their time. And so when I think of violence, it's not just a number. It's not 700 people killed in Chicago or 650. There's names behind it. And so growing up in Humboldt Park, living in West Garfield Park for the last 20 years, which currently West Garfield Park has the highest per capita murder rate in Chicago. Again, this is real life. for me. So a lot of the work that we're engaged with is kind of more on the preventative side, knowing that to prevent violence, you really got to go as young as possible to help redirect people's paths. My path, my life, I grew up in a alcoholic father. My mom had mental illness. As we talk about what's the cause of violence in Chicago, we go to the next slide. Most of you guys are I'm sure, very familiar with the ACEs study. Are you familiar with the ACEs study? Okay. Good portion of you guys. ACEs study was basically they created these 10 questions. And how you answer these questions determine a lot of your physical health, your mental health, your life choices, and so forth. And so, number one, did you have a parent who was emotionally abusive? Did you have a parent who was physically abusive? Were you sexually molested? Did you feel unloved in your family? Was your family in extreme poverty? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Did you witness one of your parents being abused? Did you live with anyone who was an alcoholic or abused drugs? Did you live with someone who was mentally ill, clinically depressed, committed, attempted suicide? Did a household member go to prison? I want you to take a moment, just take 10 seconds, look through that list, and you don't have to say anything publicly, but in your head, what's your score? My score is a 9. And I didn't choose that. These aren't things that you do. They're things that are done in your environment, right? That your parents do, that your community does. So no one gets to choose what their score is. But again, your score makes a determining factor on much of your life. So I can think of my cousin. Grew up in a very similar situation, grew up in the Uptown neighborhood, again, with a broken family and so forth, and poverty and whatnot. You know, he turns to the gangs, he sells drugs. When he's young, he's selling drugs to someone tries to rob him, he pulls out the gun first, shoots and kills that individual, spends the next 20 years of his life in prison. Comes out of prison, we're getting reconnected, and he overdoses on drugs a year into it. What's the difference between my life and his life? We grew up in the same family, the same similar context. What's the difference? Does having a high ACE score determine 100% what you're going to be, what you're going to do? Obviously not. There's things that could change the trajectory. And I think, I'm thankful that I had mentors in my life who invested in me, who walked with me, who showed me a better way, despite what I grew up in. And that has had all the difference in my life. So that's what I've committed my life to be a part of. If you go to the next slide. So if you answer yes to 4 or more, okay, just 4 of those 10, the likelihood that you'll be an alcoholic increases. How much? 4 times, right? Depression increases 5. Drug use increases 11 times. Suicide increases. Violence increases. And incarceration increases 20%. Again, the score just shows the chances, the likelihood that could happen, right? Unless something changes. So again, think through in your life, right? Think about maybe you had a high score, but I'm sure since you're here today, I'm sure there were mentors in your life. There were people in your life who walked with you, invested in you, grandparents, so forth. I had a grandmother as well, who really poured into my life. You go to the next. Why does this happen? What's the likelihood here? Trauma is formed by toxic stress, right? Or trauma leads to toxic stress, which changes the brain. It disrupts the frontal lobe of your brain, which leads to impulsive behavior. It leads to more fight or flight response, so forth. We understand that young people already, their brain's not fully developed until around 25 years old. So there's already, that's why car insurance costs more. That's why the shooters tend to be younger people more so than older people, because I'm not necessarily thinking through my decisions very well when I'm younger. I'm not thinking through that I could get locked up, that I could be throwing my life away. Someone disrespected me, I'm gonna do something about it, right? It's the fight or flight mentality. So we have to address again the toxic stress, the trauma that happens to the brain. Go to the next slide. The University of Chicago Crime Lab, they say a young man plus a disagreement plus impulsivity plus a gun equals a dead body. Okay. Most shooters tend to be young men, not necessarily young women, not that 100%, but again, it's more likely. There's some kind of disagreement. Again, the brain's not fully developed, so there's some impulsivity, right? And there's an access to a gun. Back when I was growing up, well, maybe a little bit before I was growing up, I'm not that old, but in the 70s or 80s, early 80s, you know, there was a gang fight. They'll come out with bats, right? Now guns are so accessible, everybody has a gun. And so if you know you're upset about something, it's easy access to a gun. That's why it's easy murders. Go to the next slide, please. Robert Anda, ACE's study co-founder, says what is predictable is preventable. So if we understand what leads to murders, then we could address that issue, the root issue. Next slide. So what's the solution? Next slide. Trauma-informed mentorship and work experience for teen boys greatly increases the ability to overcome the physical, emotional, social effects of trauma. This allows the wounded to become the healers. Okay. Obviously, there's multiple prongs that need to be addressed to address violence. There's no simple solution, one or two issues. But to me, from my experience, we could pour our energy into a couple things that will make drastic difference. And to me, what I've realized, what I found is trauma-informed mentorship, work experience make a huge difference in a community. So I'm going to hand it off to Jarvis. He's going to tell a little bit of his story, and then he's going to share some more.
Yes. Okay. I'm Jarvis. Grew up on the south side of Chicago. So I was about 15 years old. Moved to the west side of Chicago. Lived with my aunt and uncle. Was raised by my aunt and uncle. Spent some time living with my big sister, Army veteran. Got involved in gangs, got involved in the streets, different sorts of crowds and things like that. Didn't really consider higher education or anything rather until about my sophomore year, junior year of high school. Moved to a different, moved from the south side to the west side, attended a different high school and just wanted different for my life. And with the help of mentors from me, that was part of the reason why I'm standing here today. Young people who have mentors are 72% less likely to suffer from depression, 46% less likely to abuse drugs, 50% more likely to attend college, 130% more likely to hold leadership positions. The stats are there. And then there's another piece, we can go to the next slide that talks about trauma-informed mentorship. Okay, the positive impact of work experience. So this here is talking about a student who works a job. All right, first time working a job. In Hood Heroes, we started employing students at 11 years old. For many of those students, that's their first job. That's their first paycheck that they're earning, right? Students with no job on the left side, right? Low student engagement is the impact of work experience. 29% low student engagement. Suspended within the past year, 8.1%. And then behavioral problems, right? 11.3%. So now on the right side, we got students with a job, right? It's maybe just one job, just one work experience. Low student engagement that goes down from 29 to 24%, right? Suspensions goes down from 8.1 to 6.6%, and then behavioral problems go down from 11.3 to 8.6%. So just the overall impact on decreasing just because of work experience, like giving a student a job. All right. So yes, employ and empower students to be the heroes of their hood. If we go to the next slide, I can share a bit about that journey. I started Hood Heroes in 2020. Many of you remember what took place in 2020. What took place in the city of Chicago, just the climate. It really felt like the climate of our sort of nation, like the United States. It was just great. We had individuals who were being killed by police. We had protests going on. We had looting going on. And then on top of that, we had a global pandemic. Schools are shut down. Everything's virtual, right? And I was a counselor at the schools at the time, and I got, I should have been meeting online with students to facilitate group sessions and group circles. And so in person, my group sessions of about 15 students, now virtually, that would go to about 5 or 6 students. But then I would see students outside walking past. No mask, they're just outside, hanging out, doing whatever, right? And so again, from my experience, I know what it looks like to hang out in the streets, to get involved with different crowds. I know what it looks like to have a need for, hey, I want to make some money, right? I want to feel some value, some ownership in my community. So I know what I lean toward. And now when I look at the students, my students, I kind of have an idea of what they may be leaning toward to make some money, to find some value, right? And so that's why I started Hood Heroes with the students around me to say, hey, we live in the same community. There's trash around. We can do something about this. Don't y'all care about having a clean community? They're like, yes, let's go. I started that in 2020 with just 10 students and employed them over the summer to beautify just one neighborhood in Chicago, West Garfield Park, for the summer, 10 students. And every year since then, we employ the amount of students. We increase the amount of students we employ every summer, right? 6 weeks of summer. This past summer, we just employed 115 students on the west and south side of Chicago. Think about the impact of that, right? A student's first job at 11 years old. All right, and we're out doing community cleanup. All right, and so some of the conversations that we're having with students are about like, hey, we have a uniform. We gotta wear a uniform, okay? Our workday starts at 9 o'clock. It's probably best if you get here about 15 minutes early in case something comes up, all right? That's 11 years old. They might not be hearing that inside of a classroom, right? But now we're talking about uniform on the job. We're talking about uniform in the school. We're talking about showing up on time at work. We're talking about showing up on time at school, but also, right? Again, we talked about from a trauma-informed perspective. It's not just that I'm forcing rules and we're forcing rules down students' throats, right? But with a trauma-informed perspective, as a mentor, I come and say, hey, I kind of have an idea of where you come from, right? I've kind of had some of those similar experiences, and here's how I've kind of, some mentors who've walked with me, and sort of here's my journey along the way, right? And so what we see is students begin to buy into that, right? Students begin to invest and say, hey, no, actually, we're being the difference. A student this past summer, we're out helping the streets and sanitation. There's just a ton of trash in the alley, and there are 2 folk on a truck trying to clean up all this trash, right? And so we're out doing community cleanup, and one of the students, as we're helping them sort of load these things up onto the trash, but one of the students are like, it's not fun work, but somebody got to do it. And he took ownership of that, like somebody's got to do it. And for me, I'm just like, oh, that's it. That's ownership of your community. That's seeing a problem and saying, hey, I can go meet the needs in my community right now. Right? I don't need anyone to do it. I can do it myself, right? And that is empowering. All right, think about what that does for a student at 11 years old, and then 12 years old, and then 13 and 14 and 15, 16, 17 years old, right? As they're experiencing, right, this trauma that they're living, walk in life with a mentor, a trauma-informed mentor who says, hey, I want to equip you so that you have some tools to be able to do something about the things that you see and experience in your community, right? And begin to walk alongside students to do that. So we start with leadership training, right? And then there's a guy, Lamar Sims. He started Thriving Minds. He goes into the schools, started as young as second grade. I help them all Fridays at an elementary school on the south side, right? Students at second and third grade. He creates a wellness room or a space where students get to, instead of kicking a student out of class, right? Maybe a teacher's, their hands are full, right? They got a lot to get done, a lot of curriculum to cover, right? And so instead of a teacher kicking a kid out of school, they say, hey, go see Mr. Sims, go see Mr. Buchanan. And they come to the wellness room and get to play with a little turtle. Right? They get some, hey, I need to just 15 minutes, just take a couple deep breaths. Let's try this art project. Let's try putting this puzzle together. All right. And so we help students sort of regulate, give them tools, and so they can go back into class, right? As opposed to a teacher having to address that or being sent down to the office, right? So we start there as young as we possibly can, going into schools, equipping students through Thriving Minds, brotherhood and sisterhood. We connect them with a mentorship group for the boys, for the girls, 1 day a week, partner with the church. They say, hey, meet at the church after school, and we're gonna do a group session. When students talk about the things that are going on in their life, right? There's some curriculum, maybe there's different activities that we do together to help navigate toward that conversation, right? Talk about, I can share things that are going on in my life, things that I'm wrestling with, and students feel the same. But at the same time, through brotherhood and sisterhood, they get to connect with a mentor, right? And so that students are get a little older and that around middle school. And so we say, hey, summer's coming. I don't know what you're doing over the summer, but if you got some time, Hood Heroes is hiring, we want to employ students, right, as young as 11 years old up to 19 years old. Plug into Hood Heroes, teaching about time management, communication, conflict resolution. That's up until 19 years old. And then at that point, we're still building out college and career. So we have students who come to us and say, I haven't thought about college. I just want to work with Hood Heroes. Great, but let's give some thought to that. What does it look like? What does life look like for you after 17, 18, and 19 years old? And let's start planning them. All right, so there's a student, James, who got connected with a carpentry program over the summer through Hood Heroes. And so now he's still connected with that carpentry, showing up every day to work, right? We got a couple of students who've gone off to college, right? So building out that college and career, and then we say, hey, as we're connecting with families, right, through J29 Homes and Ministry of Legacy Disciple, we meet a student, he goes through all the programs, she goes through all the programs, and we say, hey, man, you want to help your family buy a home, right? So that's an initiative that Brian started through Legacy Disciple as well. We help families buy homes in the communities where they live at an affordable cost, right? So all around, we just want to serve, equip youth and their families to be the change makers, to be the difference makers where they come.
I'll just add, the whole thing, we're working in Roseland, which is far south side of the city. And stats will say that violent crime rises 19% for every abandoned building on the block. Because you don't have a neighbor who's engaged, so stuff happens there, so forth. So even home ownership, right, is another area to affect violence. And I think that's often overlooked, often not thought through, right? So mentorship, we talked about employment opportunities, housing, so forth. So for us, as we created this organization, we're just about 4 or 5 years old now. Really trying, our goal is understanding that I could mentor so many young people. Jarvis can mentor so many young people, right? How do we continue to expand this reach? And so just in the matter of 5 years, now we have some 50 mentors in our different programs who are walking with about 200 students. These students' lives are being transformed. And what I would just want to encourage with you guys and girls, is in your own sphere of influence, right? You may be saying, man, is everybody here a college student? Yeah. Okay. As a college student, right? What can you do to engage kids in the area, right? Serving at an elementary school, at a high school. Jarvis was impacted because somebody who came through one of our trainings started volunteering at a local high school, said, hey, I could coach basketball and I could coach track. And so meets Jarvis as a junior in high school and starts walking with him, mentoring him, and Jarvis' life becomes transformed, and then now Jarvis pays it forward to others, right? So here's a guy who at the time was 19 years old, I think, Mitch. He decided not to do the college path, but just, again, serving in his community. And so whether we're a college student, whether we're a doctor, a lawyer, right? It's all of our responsibility as part of human society, right? How could I help my environment flourish? What could I do to be a change maker, right? And you don't have to have an organization. You don't have to have $1 million budget. If you have $10, right, in your hand, in your pocket, and you have a couple hours, right, just taking someone out to grab lunch or coffee, right, means a lot. Just starting a conversation with somebody, just showing up to the park, to the basketball hoop and playing with a young cat, right, and showing them that they're important, that someone cares about them, makes a huge difference. So really, we were asked to kind of think through a couple of takeaways, and for us, I'll just repeat really what we said already. Well, one, I would add, making sure that we're healed people. I had to learn real quick that, man, I had a lot of trauma that I had to work through myself. And if I didn't do that, it was going to affect my relationships with friends. It was going to affect my marriage. It's going to affect so much, right? And so, one, making sure that we're doing the work that we need to do. And so going to the therapy, right? Going to the sessions, having friends that you could talk with and share stuff with, right? Have some kind of faith tradition, right? That you lean into. So making sure that we're healing from our own trauma, knowing that hurt people, right? So the more healing we do, the more we can help other people in that process. And then second, again, mentor a team. Again, find somebody, right, to walk with, to invest in, to help ask questions about what their future, what they want to do in life, to help see their potential. This is huge. When I talk about mentorship, I would define mentorship as someone who could see the best in somebody and helps them to see it themselves, right? So you could look at a kid, man, they're rowdy, they're jumping up and down, they're always getting in trouble, always getting kicked out of the class, whatever. And you can say, man, that's a troubled kid. They're disruptive, they're disrespectful, so forth. What I see is leadership potential. I see someone who's not afraid to speak up. I see someone who doesn't follow the crowd. I see someone who sets their own pace, right? That's someone who's a leader. And we have to be able to see that potential in people. I always say, look through the shadows to the strength. Look through what we could define as the dark sides of somebody, right? And see the positives within that individual. Again, call it out from them. And then employ a team. And you may be like, man, how am I going to employ a team? Like my wife and I, we pay young kids just to clean up trash on our block. I could do it. My wife could do it, out in front of our house. We could mow our own lawn and so forth. But it's like, hey, we intentionally set aside so much money every week to pay a young person to do it, because for them, that is giving them work experience. It's giving them, it's giving us time to talk with them, right? It's putting some money in their pockets, so forth. So even if you have $20, right? Like paying a young kid to do something in your community, to make a change, you're instilling within them a vision of the future. I love the name Hood Heroes because really it's exactly that. It's helping students who see what's around them and start to see themselves as being the hero of their own story, of their own neighborhood, of their own community. So we don't want to take up too much time to just talk at you guys. You guys are smart. You're in college. You're at Loyola. I mean, I almost dropped out of college, so you guys are way smarter than me. I would just love to hear from you all, questions that you guys have for either of us, thoughts on anything that we shared, perspectives that you guys bring to the table. What are you guys doing to make a difference in the area of violence in your community, in your city, so forth. So I would just, if that's cool. Yeah, okay. Open floor.
I have a question. So is Hood Heroes associated with One Summer Chicago?
I think out of our 115 spots, I think we had 7 spots that were through One Summer Chicago. And so we raised the other funding from individuals, we got a few grants, so forth.
Were these individuals derived from the neighborhoods that were affected or from other parts of the city?
They're all from the west and south side. So if you know neighborhoods of Chicago, we employed students this past summer from broader than just these communities, but these were the hubs where they met. So West Garfield, Austin, Roseland, Pullman, those 4, I believe. This next summer, we're gonna add, I think, Washington Heights, Lawndale, Inglewood, at least those 3, right? And Humboldt Park.
Do they all come to you or are there like specific sites in those neighborhoods they report to?
Yeah, they all have a meetup spot. Go ahead,
Yes,
Jarvis.
so depending on the scheduling for the day, but for the most part, they're all, we have central locations for each of the sites. Students who live closest to Austin, they'll attend the Austin side, students who live close to it.
So each site has about 30 students, 30 to 40 students, and they're serving that community. Okay. That's great. So all of our mentors are trained to be hand in hand with the family dynamics. So we're in regular communication with the parents. We're doing events, dinners, award ceremonies. We're inviting families to it. We're asking, families of, they all have our number. And so if a parent is having an issue with the kid, a lot of times they'll call us. They're like, yo, you got to come get Tommy because I'm about to strangle this kid, right? And so we understand that every mentor is just an additional layer of support for a student, right? It's the nuclear family, right? Mom, dad, grandparents, uncles, aunts, so forth, right? Are part of that. Mentors come and help support that. Yeah, and we also do monthly trauma-informed training that we invite parents to join as well. So it's for all of our mentors and parents.
What are you seeing developing in terms of the mentees of mentors?
Yeah. So the organization is literally like, we've both been doing this for a little while longer, but the organization is about 5 years old. But so this summer we're employing, Hood Heroes, you could probably talk about LIT program. You should do that. And then
So
summer?
the students 16 and 19 years old, they work about 24 hours a week, 25 hours a week over the summer for 6 weeks, right? Right. So 11 to 15, they typically work 1 day a week on a Saturday, and for the most part, they're just gonna pick up trash. They're gonna master that, all right? And then the 16 to 19-year-old students, those are typically like the big dogs. Like on campus, those are maybe the sophomore, junior, senior, right? They kind of are holding some leadership positions. People are looking at them for direction about some things. Their names are being called, right? And so one of the things we realized that with that, right, we got to teach people how to become leaders, right? And so we can't just expect our youth to just automatically like, hey, you're 16, you got to put your big boy pants on now. So we're like, someone has to invest that into our students, right? And so over the summer with the 16, 19-year-old students, visiting different business owners, leaders. We're mapping through, students were dreaming about a business they would start. Like who would be on the board? How, all of those things, right? But all of those experiences for the 16 and 19-year-old students. So a step after that, these are the 19 and older students, right? These are students who are removed, right? So maybe some of them, they've gone to college, right? But they have flexibility over the summer, they need to work. And they're still invested in Hood Heroes, and so we say, hey, come back from school. We got a position lined up for you as assistant site leader. And so now the things that usually the site leader is doing, like mapping out the community cleanup route for the day, partnering with different schools and like-minded organizations in the community. Now it's the assistant site leaders, those college-age students who've been involved with Hood Heroes already. They're now making those connections. They're checking in with students. They're mapping out the site that we're going to be doing community cleanup for the day. They're passing out the vests, the gloves, the trash bag. They're taking care of attendance, right? Like they're connecting with parents, all of those things, right? It's not just that, so the leaders can kind of push that responsibility off, right? But again, what's the goal? We want to raise up leaders, and we have to be willing to take the time and train them up in that.
So, in regards to like demographics, the type of children that you let in there, are these like at-risk kids, or are these like young people affiliated with gangs?
Yeah, so I mean, a number of our students have connections across programs. So there are students who've been involved since they were young with Brotherhood and Sisterhood, which also Ministries of Legacy Disciple. Some of them, I serve as a counselor in the school, so some of them have come through that relationship. Most of the students employed, it's a relationship based. And even within there, we have some students who are just like, hey, one more step and I'm going to the streets. And we got some students who are just like, hey, I'm looking at college and I need a job and I want to do something with my time. So.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a mix, even the term at risk, how do you define that per se, it's different for everybody. But again, these students they're all coming from what would be considered disinvested communities of Chicago.
West Austin.
Yeah, west and south side.
Roseland.
Yeah. So this summer we're adding Humboldt Park, North Lawndale, and Inglewood, and Washington Heights. So 4 new neighborhoods. We've last summer and this summer we'll continue West Garfield, Austin, Roseland, and Pullman.
And then, it started in Roseland.
Hood Herald started in Austin. Well, West Garfield, I'm sorry. Okay.
How is this funded in terms of the mix between government resources and you kind of mentioned donors?
Yeah, so we don't get any government funding right now. If you want to help us out, we'll talk to you afterwards. Right now it's all through individuals and some foundations. Chicago Community Trust has been behind us. Chicago Beyond is another local organization, foundation.
You guys aren't partnered with the mayor's office?
What's
You
that?
guys aren't partnered with the mayor's office?
We're building some good connections with this administration.
Speaking of partnerships, you mentioned the supports, with. About the.
Yeah. So we as an organization are faith-based. We're and our brotherhood and sisterhood mentorship programs all connected with churches. So the idea is a church, again, whatever faith-based tradition you are, a church, a synagogue, a mosque, right, provides broader support, right? And so everyone needs that support in some form of fashion. So our thinking is through, okay, let us get into the schools, connect with students and invite them to the local church in the area to get connected to a broader scope of mentors. And so right now we have 8 active churches that we participate with in the programs, and we have about another 8 that are ready. Yep.
We have a question in the chat. Actually,
Yeah.
From Barbara. She asked, what impact does drugs and alcohol have? And what community initiatives are or can?
So, what, if I'm hearing it right, what impact do drugs and alcohol have, right? And what are we doing about it, or what can be done about it? Yeah. So my wife and I, we never had biological kids, but we've always had an open house. So we've had homeless people, houseless people live with us. We've had drug addicted people live with us. Right now we have a guy that I've mentored for 30 years, since I was young. I'm old now. And he's fighting some addictions. And so personally, like, I'm involved in that as an organization. We've put our energy into kind of helping to prevent people going down that path, right? Because people do drugs for the most part, or abuse alcohol or abuse drugs, right? Because of the trauma. They're trying to find some escape, right? And so it's a lot easier. Frederick Douglass has a quote. He says, it's easier to build strong men than repair broken men, or something like that, right? The idea is, if you ever dealt with someone with addictions, like, that's a long, tedious journey, and it's just hard. Not to say that we shouldn't do that. That's why, again, my wife and I are committed to that. But if you could prevent somebody from ever getting into it in the first place, that's a way easier, a way better turnaround for that. So again, just to answer the question straightforward, as an organization, we aren't set up for that. But there's great organizations around the city that we direct people to that do have issues in those areas.
Are there, if you could tell Loyola what to do to help your work or what they're trying to do, what would you ask Loyola or other universities to correct?
Yeah, something that comes off the top of my head is RSOs. Great opportunity. Colleges. All the training, the form training, all of that. That's initially what comes on the top of my head.
I would just echo that. What you having as a college student is, you think your schedule's busy, it ain't nothing. Like, the older you get, the busier you get. If you get married, if you have kids, you start a career, so forth, it just gets busier and busier. Right now, you have the most free time that you're ever gonna have, at least until retirement. So make the most of that. Look, and it doesn't have to be with us, look for an organization within your community here in the far northeast side, right, of Chicago, to serve with, and I again would make the case that the younger you could get, the more impact you're gonna make. And I understand not everybody likes kids. Like, me and my wife mess around all the time because she likes little kids. I'm like, snotty nose and like, but when they get to like be teenagers, then I take them, type thing. But again, investing in young people as much as you can, and you don't have to, again, like, start a big group, like 1 or 2 students, right? Just invest yourself in them, pour into them.
There's a African proverb. Word Ubuntu means I am because we are. That was our theme for Hood Heroes this past summer. We spent time teaching. Living out. I am, as often said as well as I'm my best self, my most fulfilled self when my community surrounds me. Alright, and so in order for me to grow and be my best self, I need you. And I need you to grow, and you need me to grow, right? That was one of the values that I think was so impactful, and I believe it should shape somewhat our perspective when it comes to addressing that. We need each other in order to be our best selves. So let's get on this train together. Let's grow together. All right.
Yeah, thank you for coming all the way out here. I know it's a long trip. Thank you for your time and answering questions and. Just wondering if any of the kids that you work with are involved in just like getting out and how that complicates your goals.
Yeah. So I can think of one individual who worked with us this summer. I'll just call him Jay, but you know, we didn't know him before the summer started, and the more I heard about his story, the more trauma I saw, right? So he ran away from home for like 3 years. You know, his mom has mental illness. He was kind of living with his grandmother, but she didn't have the energy or the time really to pour into him. And so, yeah, he just bounced from place to place, ended up living with somebody who murdered somebody at the apartment. So he had to be a witness to that. He was 16. And then the day after the program ended, he got locked up. And so he just got out of juvenile detention Monday. And so I've been in touch with this PO officer, and we're working out because he has house arrest till December, trying to make sure he gets back into school, you know, just advocated for him, right? Trying to get some exceptions so that I could go take him out somewhere and continue to pour into him and invest in him. And so yeah, that's us. It's needed again, the Ubuntu idea, right? That we need to be in this together. And so it's, you know, it's the faith-based, it's the civic engagement, it's the community organizations, right? We all need to be in tandem. And what's the challenge is that we often stay in our own world, you know, for multiple reasons. And so we don't talk to each other. And so we're not really doing the best service for the community at large.
Do you guys ever go into these juvenile facilities to identify potential candidates for the bureau experience?
Yeah, so me and Jarvis just went last week. It was my first time in the juvenile detention center in probably like 15 years. And I was talking to Jarvis about that. I was like, man, we need to be in here regularly. So we're trying to figure that out. We have some people who are inside as a chaplain. And so trying to find ways that we could go there more regularly and make connections, because either it's new connections, students that we didn't know, or, you know, sometimes the students that we have interacted with who are in there.
How do you choose? Do you guys ever turn some down and choose others?
Yeah, we haven't turned anyone away yet, except applications that came in too late. So if we had the funds for it, basically we hired anybody. Yeah, we did an interview for students, the older students, 16 and over. But it was more for their experience of being in an interview. Yeah, we want to give everybody the opportunity.
Are there any other students?
Are the students who drop out the program?
Yeah.
No. I would say we have about an 85% retention rate, and which is good, you know. But there are students who you know, working hard, the idea of working hard, they're just not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
You know, again, some of these students are 11 years old when they start.
Just working, just Saturday.
Yeah. And but overall, kids, if they love anything, they love money, right? And so, so they're getting money in their pockets. We pay them minimum wage, even if they're 11, 12 years old. So they're making decent money for their age.
When you have, like a group of 13-year-olds. In the summer, do all of them usually come back as 14-year-olds and do all of them come back, or is it, when you talk about like 85% retention, is it that at the beginning of the summer, we've got 100, at the end of the summer, there's still 85?
Yeah. During the summer, it's about 85%. It's probably about 75% year after year. Yeah, so a lot of them do come back. Because again, they built it, it's not just a job, it's a community that they're forming. They're hanging out with friends, they're hanging out with mentors. We don't say goodbye to them at the end of the summer. Now we invite them to a mentorship program.
Let's hang out, let's movie pizza,
Yeah.
let's go to the gym. What time's your game? I've been to quite a few football games.
Yeah, we're sitting out in the cold in football games. I took someone driving a couple weeks ago to get their driver's license. We're going to court cases, you know, we're visiting the homes. We're building relationships with the families. And so it's an ongoing relationship.
I know right now, this is your focus in civic engagement and community. Have you considered, or are you already providing resources to these trauma or therapy or
Yeah.
psychology?
So we have a clinical specialist on our staff that trains us and that speaks into our curriculum and so forth. And then she's building a network right now for students. We've set aside budget money for any student that needs therapy, counseling, special services. The hard thing we're finding is that most young people don't see the need for it, right? There's still the stigma that I'm not crazy, I don't, need to talk to a shrink or whatever. Or trauma just becomes normal. It's like, well, I haven't been through anything that everybody else hasn't been through, So that's the area we're trying to figure out. We have the funds, we have the resources available, but trying to help the students realize the need for it. So in our programs, we do circles, check-ins, and it's kind of like a soft group therapy of sorts, which gives them kind of a space to at least start to share some emotions and stuff that's going on. But yeah.
Is there any annual reporting for your?
Is there an annual report like finances?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Retention or value retention or.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you can look at the IRS and find our, tax filings or whatever. For the financial numbers, it's probably a good idea as we continue to grow up as an organization to have a more robust annual report. And so I'm gonna take that and
Which we are planning for. We just sat down. Had a
Right.
Conversation. Yeah, we started in 2020 with youth engagement. Right, and so even to give thought to something like that surrounding our youth. It's needed.
follow up in 3 months. We'll have an answer for you.
Just give me, like, how does it work with paying such young children?
So we pay them under whatever the amount is, 600, that needs to be filed per year. So as long as we stay under that, we're good. At least that's my understanding. It's just been recorded. And so they all get like a debit card that we put money on and so forth. So it'll be seen more of a stipend than a salary at that age. Once they become 16, then they actually run through payroll, we take taxes out and all that.
Is that considered sporadic income?
When they're 16 and older or under?
If this is still minimum wage.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of leave that to their families to work out. So if anybody knows taxes and wants to help us in that process, we could definitely look into that, but you know, I don't know how to answer that question.
You mentioned that all the things.
Yeah, so we submit to foundations right now. We've gotten some decent grants from foundations. But yeah, if you're asking, you know, if you could help or whatever, you know.
Small organization. No grant writer.
Yeah, I'm the grant writer.
Is that what a university could help you with?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All questions? Again, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, online and in person. On a personal note, I confirm that, today's learning has been significant and I'm convinced that students, action items provided, finally, I want to thank Ryan Jarvis once again for creating time to schedule and facilitating this discussion. It's very insightful. For all of us and with the knowledge. Thank you very much. Please enjoy the rest of the night. Oh, yes. One more thing. As I said before, this is our first community conversation series of community conversations. Our upcoming community conversation is next month in December 6th. Read on November 29th, which you can register for. There's flyers up here on your way out. I'm looking to, we'll be sending more emails and promoting those. And also we have our flyer for our state date for our larger summit, community advocacy and violence prevention summit, where we're going to be on moderating discussion on X and dogs. So, if you go into you, we'll do all the time. Inside and speak a little more about, yeah, thank you for coming and give us time.